I was talking to one of my friends about the level of anxiety that can come up right before you run a game session. For us, even after we prepped a game, there's still this lingering concern that the awesomeness that's in our heads won't translate well onto the table. My thought was that once you get past those first few minutes of play, typically everything flows more smoothly because by then it's not just my game, it's our game, everybody at the table. We're all helping the game move forward, but it's those first few minutes that I want to talk about in this video, right after I make my Save versus Justin. For me, I feel the same way anytime I'm presenting something at work or maybe doing some kind of public speaking, basically stage fright. I've been running games for a long time and I still feel it all the time. But having a plan for a strong start to the game session really helps out, especially if that plan includes getting all the players involved as quickly as possible. My first instinct was to try to make that as cool as the start of like every James Bond movie, where you start off in the middle of some kind of action, have players kick some butt, look cool doing it, and then have Duran Duran play some intro music. That might work well for a one-shot, or maybe the start of an adventure, but it's probably going to start falling apart once you're in the middle of an ongoing campaign, especially if you end a session in some kind of safe haven. It'll start to seem forced. If I'm the hero, why is it that every time I sleep at an inn, somebody kicks in the door, or tries to burn down the town? People are going to stop inviting me in. And we don't need to do that. We don't need to start with conflict. We're just looking for a way to get everybody's imagination going, including our own. This may not be an issue for many of you. Likely, if you've run a few game sessions with your regular group, you've probably already fallen into a natural rhythm of how your game sessions start up. Here's mine. Players start showing up, maybe not all at once. The first thing we want to do is socialize a bit, get caught up on each other's lives. Get comfortable, grab some snacks. We tend to do this at or near the game table as everybody gets their character sheets organized and, chants the proper rituals to their dice. To start narrowing in on the game, I'll play some theme music. I actually try to pick a song or track as the theme song for the campaign. A subtle cue that, hey, adventure is waiting once everybody's done chatting. During a pause in the chatter, I'll say something witty like, hey, is everybody ready to start? And then everybody just kind of stares at me. And this is where I want to have a short plan, an icebreaker. If you saw my video on using NPC cards, you know that one of the things I typically like to start with is a quick recap of what happened in the last game. Highlighting NPCs or items using cards or pictures to remind everyone where we left off and what's driving them forward. I might also point out where they are on a map to give them context. I know some DMs like to offer up that recap to their players, maybe giving inspiration or some kind of benefit to the player who volunteers. Better yet, suggest that player gives their recap in character, which is usually hilarious and may offer some insight into what's going on in that character's mind. I've done that, and it works well in my adult games where some of the players take notes. I find that in my kids' games, where less notes are taken, my players may feel a bit uncomfortable being put on the spot like that. Instead, I might just ask questions during my own recap to get them involved. Things like, hey Groovius, what did you find in that graveyard? Or Setka, how did you defeat that vampire spawn? I try to remember to ask the PCs by their character name rather than the player's name, giving them a chance to start thinking a bit in character. From there, you may be ready to jump straight into the game, and if you're at an exciting point in your adventure, that may be all you need. If you're at a slower point, though, I think there's an opportunity to get everybody talking and acting like their characters while learning a little bit more about them. Sometimes I'll come up with a few questions to ask the characters while they're sitting around the campfire. What do you miss most about your home? What character are you playing a game with? Why are you letting them win? What will you do when your quest is done? Or it could be one question that everybody takes turns answering. Something like, what hobbies are you engaged in as you sit around the campfire? Tell us a bit about what you're making or doing. Now everybody's thinking in character and ready to tackle the next encounter. Another thing I might do is ask each player to draw a card from a deck like this to give them a glimpse into a possible fate or fortune. Then I challenge them to try to bring a short story element based on their card into the game session at some point. This lets them take control of the game for a minute or two, to add to it or tweak it in some way. As an incentive in my D&D games, I give that player inspiration for playing their card and adding something new to the world. I like these. They're from a deck called Madame Endor's Fortune cards. Along with a cool picture, each card has a simple word or phrase that might help the player start thinking about how they can add to the story for good or ill. It's usually for good. For example, maybe they drew the chalice, which suggests rejuvenation and fulfillment. Then later a player might describe discovering a small shrine as the party travels, which offers them a moment of rest. They might describe it as providing some kind of shade from the sun, or maybe a spring offering a refreshing drink. Ask questions about what it's like. Have a short scene there, just a minute or two. There's all kinds of other decks of cards like this out there that are meant to give you a random quote or phrase to offer you a bit of encouragement or guidance, like this one, Forest Fae. One of the next campaigns I'm excited to run is The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I'm still a ways off from running it, but I've been collecting props for the game, and I'm excited to use this deck of cards as my icebreaker oracle as the players venture into the Fey Wild. Tarot cards are of course great for this too, and there's so many different tarot decks out there that you can probably find one that fits your campaign just right. In fact, I saw there's a licensed Dungeons and Dragons tarot deck out there that uses stats like strength and wisdom in place of typical card suits like swords and wands. The Curse of Strahd campaign also features a tarot-ish deck of cards called the Taroka that you can buy a copy of, which is pretty dark. Some tarot decks include words or phrases on their cards, and some don't, and I think that's okay. The imagery on most tarot cards is meant to inspire the imagination all on its own. The goal is not to have the players add exactly what they see or read on these cards to the game. It's used to spark the imagination to add something new. With that in mind, you could even use cards from a game like Dixit if you already have a copy at home. This is a great board game where players are trying to get each other to vote on their card based on a common sentence or phrase that one of the players comes up with. The cards included are beautiful, weird, and dreamlike, and could easily be used as a kind of oracle. Other game systems have taken this a step further and published decks of cards to use in a similar way that also have system-specific benefits already listed on the card. If you've seen my other videos, you know I'm a fan of the Game Mastery line of products. They don't disappoint here either. They've published 2 decks of cards, Plot Twists and Flashbacks. Each card provides a phrase, an illustration, and some inspirational cues to help players take control of the game for a quick scene. And then if they do, it lists the in-game effect or bonus that the player gets. These bonuses are meant for the Pathfinder system, but they could probably be used in a D&D game as well with some DM interpretation. I think Savage Worlds is one of the first systems I've seen use a deck like this. Their current version is called the Savage Worlds Adventure deck. By the way, when I give players a benefit like inspiration, we use one of these tokens to help track that, keeping up with my obsession of adding physical bits and pieces to the table. It's another great way of providing a reminder that inspiration is available to the player. It's also a cool way to reinforce the theme of your adventure or campaign a bit. These were made for a game called Houses of the Blooded, but a quick search on Amazon or Etsy shows a massive variety of inspiration tokens or coins to fit your game. Adding icebreakers and oracles as a kind of starting ceremony has really helped me have a strong and fun kickoff for my games. If you want to go even deeper into this concept of ceremonies highlighting different themes or stages of your game, or even helping drive the pacing of your game, you might also want to check out an RPG called Polaris by Ben Lehman. It's an amazing game all on its own, but even if you don't want to play that system, there's some really cool ideas you can add to your GM toolkit. How do you kick off your games? Are there ceremonies you enjoy at your table? Do you get the pre-game jitters like I do? I'd like to hear about it, so please click all the stuff, drop a comment, and continue the conversation with me.